Hi, this is Lauren for the Module 4 discussion post. And for this post, I wanted to focus on maybe issues or things that I thought stood out from the Chapter 10 in the Rent and Reason text. In this chapter specifically focused on serving college students today and tomorrow. Sorry, I'm referencing my notes, and kind of talked about I felt like it summarized the book fairly well on some of the key issues that it talked about throughout the entire book that we've been reading. The one thing that I think stood out the most for me was the section that they discussed the inputs and how enrollment, they see enrollment really continuing to grow over the next decade or however long. But my one question, or I guess maybe my issue with that, is really how the book is really determining what enrollment growth means. The previous chapters, chapter 3, just started to describe, from the Rent and Reason book, started to describe the different enrollment types, so full-time, part-time, online, maybe distance education students, transfer students, students at 2-year schools, 4-year schools, maybe students who have interrupted enrollment, maybe they are enrolled at multiple universities. So kind of looking at all of those different types of enrollment, it really raised a lot of questions for me as far as when they talk about enrollment growth continuing. Is there a particular area that they feel like it's going to continue in? Is it really going to be focused more on full-time or on part-time enrollment? And how do MOOCs play a fact in, or how do MOOCs relate to that enrollment growth, and really how they anticipate tracking these things, because I think when students start to enroll in multiple universities and they start double dipping or have they have interrupted enrollment, I just would see that as a challenge. So even knowing that enrollment will probably grow at these institutions, is there one particular area that it's going to grow the most? And so that was probably my one, I don't know, issue or fact that stood out to me from the Rent and Reason chapter 10. The next thing that actually I think kind of relates to that fairly well was having universities kind of measure retention, persistence, graduation rates, and it really talked about there would be much more effort on the part of the university to kind of track these things. But kind of going backwards again in the text, when they talked about all the different types of enrollment, I feel like that it would be even harder to kind of measure those things, persistence and graduation rates, when students are bouncing from school to school, or they're taking longer, or they have interrupted enrollment. So kind of being able to measure that was one of the kind of outcomes that it talked about in chapter 10. And I guess I just thought that sounded really difficult. And I think, working at the university, you see those things already. So knowing that enrollment has diversified a little bit more, just anticipating issues with that, or anticipating problems with that. Probably after reading this particular chapter, and again, I'm just focusing on the Rent and Reason text, I felt like it was related to some of the work that I'd been doing on my case study. And for the case study, I focused on first-generation college students. And in chapter 10, again, it talks about one of the outcomes that universities should be really focusing on in this enrollment growth is really having a commitment to equity. And they described equity as being not necessarily providing the exact same type of service, or just really not treating every student alike, but being able to meet those diverse students at their level and helping them be successful. And so when I thought about that kind of particular outcome as predicted by the Rent and Reason text, I thought, first generation college student, and really many of the kind of student groups that we all have chosen for our case study would really fall into that, and having the university put more of a commitment to kind of meeting these students where their needs are. I also thought that might be something that would become more and more difficult when students are, even though enrollment is growing, maybe for a first generation college student, does that definition change? And that was something that I kept seeing a lot in my literature review for my case study, was a common definition for a first generation student. So For any reason talks about the different types of enrollment, part-time, full-time, distance, online education, transfer students. Does that then change what a first-generation college student would look like? And then how would a university or an institution be able to really focus on providing equity to them, or having a commitment to equity if they're entering in the university in such a variety of ways? So I think those were things that kind of stood out to me as I was reading this particular chapter. And maybe the last thing that I think stood out to me in this particular area, another key issue was Chapter 10 talked about universities needing to, in order to serve the 21st century students better, they need to be keep their university very transparent. So that could be about demands, expectations, the cost of attendance, but with the student population diversifying so much, it definitely kind of draws light to, or draws attention to, the greater effort that the university has to put in. So really, I felt like this whole chapter talked about universities and institutions really kind of picking up the pace and keeping up with the students. So I'm interested to see everyone else's video and to see everyone in class on Saturday to hear maybe how they felt the chapters relate to their case study. So thanks so much for listening, and see you on Saturday.